We always put off the things that we're afraid of. The key in life, I think, is to say, I'm afraid of this, but walk towards it because it's never as bad as you think it's going to be.
Somewhere along the line, we learn to be afraid of failure, and we shouldn't be, because you learn more in failing than you ever learn in success.
Ironically, people say that's not fair, but there's no fairness in it involved. I mean, I broke the law. I certainly should be punished. I would contend today, and once you go to prison, you start working on how you're going to be released immediately, not just kick back and do whatever you need to do.
Hello, and welcome to the Brenton Peck Podcast. Today, my guest is Mark Renick. Mark spent time in his life incarcerated in Idaho. He now advocates for and spends time helping those who are leaving incarceration and returning to society. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we mentioned you were incarcerated.
Absolutely.
Why don't we walk all the way back? What kind of led to all that?
Oh, I think that's that is way back. I would tend to introduce myself as almost like a consumer of correctional services, because I actually have had a 2-year stint. I had two 2-year stints in California, and then I moved up into Boise in 1995 and ended up doing 7 years here too. So as I sit here, I'm 72 years old, and since the age of 30, I've done 10 years of my adult life incarcerated. So I've got a combination of time in California as well as Idaho prisons.
Takes or not so nice, but
well, I think I would consider myself blessed at this point in time. It takes some of us a while to figure out what we're going to do in life.
Yeah,
and I took a longer path. I'm not so sure I would change any aspect of that. As I sit here with you, I'm very happy and blessed to do what I do.
Yeah. So, being that you were incarcerated multiple times, was it the same each time? Was there like a pattern that you fell into, or what kind of led to that?
I certainly wasn't the nicest person in the world, probably for the first 50 years of my life. Functioning alcoholic for 35 years and pretty selfish, pretty self-centered. Never really super happy. So when you do those sorts of things to occupy your time, you're kind of always attempting to numb, I guess you would say, not addressing the important things of life. And so I did that and kind of numbed my world with alcohol. And I was functioning alcoholic. I was successful. I made money. I was okay, but I wasn't happy. So it took this last time incarceration, really, to be honest with you, it said, when finally the state of Idaho said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to spend at least 7 years in prison, for that to get my attention, I guess you would say.
What led to a 7-year conviction? Is that like a DUI? Or?
No, it's the what I hope we talk about today are the different laws here in the state of Idaho. I mean, I was a Californian, so I came up here and did what I thought was certainly it wasn't the smartest thing in the world, but it wasn't a major aspect. I walked into dry cleaners and said, hey, look, I'd like the money out of the till, and I didn't have a gun. I was polite. I was nice. But for that, I got 20 years in prison here in Idaho, and 7 of it was fixed. 7 meaning that I needed to do 7 before I was released. So it was a difference. It was kind of like an eye-opener for me of welcome to Idaho. We prosecute people differently here than we do in California.
Yeah. So the incarceration wasn't necessarily related to alcohol. It was.
Oh, I was certainly not sober at all when I did it. So, and I was making the greatest decisions in the world, and it was based in certainly being alcoholic. I'd had a difficult interaction with the mother of my children at that point in time, my then wife, and so I had said I was going to strike out on my own, and stupidly decided that I needed some extra money to do that, and walked into a dry cleaning establishment, which ironically I still honor and go to every week to take my clothes to. Nice. So it's sort of ironic how life does that to you.
Yeah. So you said laws are different here from California. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think that Idaho's approach to the Department of Corrections is much different than it is in different states across the country. We like to incarcerate people here in the state of Idaho. I think if many of the people don't, I would contend that most Idahoans don't know how high our incarceration rates are per capita. I mean, we have the highest per capita incarceration rate for women in the world. We have the third highest for men. So we put people in prison. I would say as we sit here, as you go out there past the airport, you don't know that there are 6,000 people live over that hill, and there's 7 prisons out there. Most people don't know that. So kind of what I've grown to work on since my release is kind of addressing how we Idahoans support and view that population that's returning to our community. And that's kind of where I got fortunate enough to start working and be blessed to do today.
Yeah. I'm a little curious if some of that is, I guess I have twofold thought here.
Sure.
One is, do we not have enough, I guess, intervention, for lack of a better term, preempting breaking those laws or getting incarcerated, and then compounded on top of that, do we just have stricter laws? And I see two pieces there that can be played with.
Well, I think Idaho has a different approach to prosecuting people who have broken the law. And so when somebody in, let's say, California, for instance, breaks the law and they get sentenced to 2 years in prison, you know that you're going to get out in 13 months. They have good time. If you go to prison in Idaho, you won't get a 2-year sentence. You'll get like a 2 to 5 year sentence. And so then the condition upon your release is based upon the parole commission. Idaho Parole Commission will release you. So it's a total different state agency. So it's not up to the Department of Corrections. It's up to the Parole Commission to let you go. And the Parole Commission, if you don't know this, is made up of 7 people who are appointed by the governor who decide whether or not I'm able to leave when I leave. And they weigh the pros and cons of it, and they tell me whether or not I can leave. And so that tends to be sort of vague and nebulous, and it leads people in that intermediary area where they don't really know when they're going to be released.
Is it presented kind of like appearing before court again, where you have a chance to argue for getting that early release, or is it just they do their own independent research and decisions?
So it's best almost sometimes to take my example. For instance, for the infraction that I had here in Idaho, I was sentenced to 20 years, and I was sentenced to 7 years fixed. So before I could go before that parole commission, I needed to wait 6.5 years. So at 6.5 years, I went before 3 people, 3 of the 7 people who were, there was only 5 when I got out, but 7 people who would be there, and they essentially did a report on me on whether or not it was okay for me to be released back into society, and then they make that decision. So and it's just different. There's no good time here as opposed to that. So it's real vague, almost nebulous as opposed to what's going to happen to you upon your release. So the point I always make is you work 6.5 years before you get that appearance. What do you do? In my case, after the first year of incarceration, I went to my case manager and I said, hey, listen, how can I make this easier for me to get out? And he pulled my name up on the computer and he looked at my sentence and he said, hey, kick back for about 6 years and then come see me. I'll get you out of here. Now, to me, kick back and do that isn't necessarily a pro-social sort of situation in terms of how I was going to address getting out. I would contend today, and once you go to prison, you start working on how you're going to be released immediately, not just kick back and do whatever you need to do. So it's changed a little bit in terms of the programming that's on the inside, and I think it's gotten much better, but there really is an attitude that says, I can't do anything until the Parole Commission lets me go. And I think the thing I would have people consider is the fact that I go up before the Parole Commission and I don't know whether I'm going to get out 7 years or 20 years. The people that love me, what do? They go, is Dad coming home in 20 years or is he coming home in 7? So in most cases, like what happened to me, wives bail and family says, no, he's never getting out. I don't ever want to talk to this guy again because you don't know when you're going to get out. And consequently, too, at 6.5 years, if I go before that board And they say to me, well, I don't like necessarily the way you're carrying yourself, Mr. Renick, right now, or I don't like your looks, or you've did this. Come back and see me in 2 years, which they do frequently. Do I go back to my living arrangement and say, hey, guys, I get to play cards and walk the track with you for 2 years? I'm excited about that. I tend to go back and not be as excited about my outlook on life. I tend to go back and sort of act out. I tend to go back and not be happy about that because I don't necessarily think that I was given a fair shot in terms of being released. I've worked 6.5 years. I've worried about it 6.5 years. Now you're telling me I have to stay here 2 more? Am I a good citizen going back? I don't think so. And much less, what about the people who loved me, who cared for me, and who want me out? What do? They say, what? Well, in 2 more years, what's he going to do? Is he going to get 2 more years? So it's just not a very sound system, if you will, for allowing people to understand. Those who love people that are in the system, makes it very difficult for them to understand and to comprehend that system. And unfortunately, when you're in my spot, and I talk to a lot of these people, and because I do this sort of work all the time, they don't understand it, and they go, this isn't fair. This isn't right. It's that's just the way it is. And people don't recognize it until you're in that system.
Yeah. I think we all need a path laid out for us in anything we're working towards. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for a career, you got to have a goal in mind so that you can map out steps to get there. If you're incarcerated and you're looking to get out, I think there should be some sort of path laid out there. So I think like the first thing that comes to mind is you said just kick back for 6 years. And it's like, kick back and do what? Like, exactly. Are they looking at my behavior? Yeah. What are they measuring? What are they looking at? But even beyond that, I think the next thing that comes to mind for me isn't just the goal of getting out, but goal of what am I going to do when I get out? So what do we have in there that sets them up for success instead of, okay, now you've spent 6 years in here. You're just kicked back. Maybe you didn't take any classes or engage in, I'm not as familiar with the prison system, work or anything.
And I got to be honest with you, over the years, I have been out 14 years. And so I've watched and I've been working in this field for probably 12. So I have watched the Department of Corrections here in Idaho change, and it's changed dramatically in terms of what they do offer on the inside. I can't, badmouth that idea. They are working hard to do programming on the inside. A lot of that has changed, to their credit. But I think what happens is that you just have a system set up in which you really don't know when you're going to get out, and you have no real influence over what's going to happen. It's a system that needs to be looked at. If Idahoans are listening to me now, you talked about several years ago they had a program where we were looking at doing Medicaid enhancement. And if you remember in that situation, it was controversial. People didn't know what to do about it. So the legislature said, hey, look, let's take this next year and let's take hearings on Medicaid and let's hear what people think about it. And then they decided at that point in time after that year, they looked at reports and they went for Medicaid enhancement. I think what I would contend and maybe argue is that the Department of Corrections need to be looked at that same way. So let's have input from people about how the system works. Is it working well? Isn't it working well? Because if you and I were a legislator and we said, hey, I know, let's take a look at this prison system and maybe we shouldn't put people in prison as long, you would be unemployed at the next poll. Next time you went to run for the legislature, you wouldn't be back in office. So it's a very difficult spot for people to do. So consequently, when the legislature rolls around every year, we've got very good people, and there are very good people in the Department of Corrections at the top. And Bree Derrick is the director now. She's a very nice lady. Her predecessors have been very nice people, but they tend not to go down to the legislature and say, hey, let's change some things around. Let's make it a little bit easier for people to get out. That's not their role. It's the role of myself and people who have been in the system and people who love people in that system to say to legislators, why does ramens cost 95 cents and I can buy a Winco for 10? Why is that? Why can't I get on the phone and talk to my loved one? Why don't they do X, Y, and Z? Those are the questions I get asked all the time. So, and there's not good answers for that.
No, I I think how we present things changes things a lot too. If you just go in and say, yes, we need people out sooner, like you said, you're not going to be there long.
It's a very complex system.
Yeah.
And I think it's, ironically, people say that's not fair, but there's no fairness in it involved. I mean, I broke the law. I certainly should be punished. And if I'm on parole, I still need to abide by what are those regulations for my parole. But there needs to be some aspect of it, I think, that has every once in a while to be looked at and tweaked, and whether we're doing it the right way or not. Other countries in the world do it totally different, and we tend to do it in a more backward sort of way in terms of locking people up, which I'm not sure is the greatest situation for us.
Yeah. I thinking in terms of narrative, like how do you change that? Saying the same thing, but in a different way, because people hear things through narrative. So if instead of we need to get people out faster, that narrative is more like, how do we provide a path for people to follow, and how do we best enable them to reenter society and be successful? Because then we make it not about, like, people will hear just make terms shorter, and they'll hear bring criminals into functioning society. But if you say help them to reenter successfully, contributing members, that narrative completely shifts, and I think people are more willing to look at it.
Yeah, I think it's I used to think that when I started this work, I was going to be supportive of people who followed me out of incarceration. And I think over the years, I've figured out that, yes, that is an objective that I have, but my real job is to educate people about how the system works and to get them to actively get involved with it and take a look at it for themselves. Because if they understand it and they can see what the issues are, then it's easier for them to get involved and change the system. Because if today 10 people called their state senator and said, hey, look, what is this? Then the next time something came up from the Department of Corrections that was a bill that that person needed to vote on, they'd say, well, boy, I've gotten a lot of letters about this. Why don't we let's take a look at this. So that's what you're always attempting to do, is to get people to get involved in the system. That's why it changes. That's how it changes.
Is there things on the flip side of that? I mean, we're talking about a little bit of things in the prison system. Is there things on the outside after they've been released that we also take part in helping them reenter? Because like you said, you had been in and out several times. Mm-hmm. So what can we do to also help people from going back in the first place?
I think much of what the work I do now and what I do, maybe we should talk about a little bit about what I do now, but I do direct an agency funded through St. Vincent de Paul. And what we do is actually pick people up from incarceration. We take them to bus stations, or we pick them up if they don't have rides. And I try to be the first stop for everybody coming out of incarceration. They come to my office, and I give them bus passes, clothing vouchers. I'm adjacent to my main food pantry, so I give them food that allows them some food before they get their food stamps. And then I offer resources for them on an ongoing basis. Also, we have a very strong employment program in which I link people up with jobs if they're looking for jobs. Part of our program also has 3 staff people that are inside the prisons at a present time, and what they do is help case managers as their people getting close to release, plan their exits. So we do a lot of that stuff, and we're very good at it. And we have a positive name, I guess you would say, for people coming out of incarceration. But the next step is people do get out, and then if they've got a plan, they can probably make that work and go forward. But I think the thing that at least we're finding more recently is if you don't figure that out fairly quickly, then you fall back into a pattern that got you into incarcerated in the first place. So almost the emphasis we're switching around to now is programming in terms of either a mentorship or support groups for people that have been out 3 to 6 months and a year after incarceration, so that they also have a place to go back and link up with. But ultimately, it is the resident that comes out that has to change their life and has to see that their life has to be changed. Really, all I am is I'm an advocate, a supporter, a cheerleader, if you will, for someone to change their behavior. And we try to provide that with, some support in terms of people that have been incarcerated working for us and can kind of help them and say, hey, look, these are some of the things I found. Go forward. How can I help you do that? If that makes sense.
Yeah. So you mentioned you have 3 people working inside the
prisons right now directly.
Is that all in like the same prison?
No, there are 7 prisons out there, and there are 3 people who just essentially spend their time supporting what the state calls case managers. And a case manager is, if I'm incarcerated and I have an issue, all the case managers have like 120 people on their caseload, and I would go to the case manager if I needed something in I couldn't get my commissary right or my whatever, I had an issue, I would go to my case manager. And so what our staff does, we call them navigators, and they come alongside the case manager and say, you're busy, this person's about to get out, can we take them through some classes? Can we help them start resumes? Can we get them thinking about where they're going to go and plan for that? And then those people aren't so constantly bombarding their case manager to do that for them. We kind of walk along with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of a cool thing we do.
Nice. Is there, this may be a little bit of a weird question, is there like an average length of incarceration that you see? Are you working more with people who have been incarcerated for like the 7-10 years, or people who maybe have a 6-month stay?
It's different. There isn't really a standard length of time that somebody's coming out. People will walk into my office that have been in 2 years, and some people, this year we've had 2 people walk out that have had 40 years. Surprisingly, those people that come out with 40 years made the quickest and smoothest transition that they surprised me even. They're really good people, and they're working in the community and giving back and doing some very good things. So you try not to say expect what you're going to say when you're sitting in my office at whatever time you've done. My job and the people that work for me's job is to listen to what you're saying and to say, what do you need right now? And can I help you get that right now? And then if you run into problems somewhere down the line, remember where this office is, because everybody in this office has been incarcerated, and we can help you with that. And we want to help you with that. So come back here, because inevitably everybody that gets out is going to hit that wall where something happens. It's going to be, a relationship, employment, housing, which is always difficult for people now in the Treasure Valley. They're going to run across those issues. And when they do, I want them to come back to my office and say, you said come back. Okay, I'm here. Now this is the thing I'm running across. How other people do with it? So that's what we try to do. Yeah. That's what we like to do.
I'm a huge proponent of one of the best ways to solve anything is community. Mm-hmm. If you try and go anything alone, it's going to be far harder or impossible. So it sounds like you're building a solid community for them to be in and around.
The only thing, as you come out of incarceration, unless you're going to need to change some of the people that you used to hang around with and develop that sense of community, because frankly, that's where you're going to have trouble finding housing, and you're only going to find housing by linking with wherever you play darts or your 12-step or your church group, wherever you hang out. Those are the resources that you're going to find that help you find some place to live. It won't be answering an ad in, the penny saver or in the newspaper to find a place to live. Somebody's going to say, hey, I really like you, and I know my cousin's brother on the 5th side has a place that's for rent. Why don't you talk to them? That's how you find that. It's the same way that's the same way you work with addiction. If addiction is your issue, you need to find that link that works for you. Is it a 12-step group? Is it Celebrate Recovery? Is it going to church? Whatever that is, you need to figure that out and do that. So my job is to come along and say, is that what you're doing? Okay, good. Let's work with that. Can this help? Hey, have you tried this? So those are the same kinds of things. Once you're ready to make that change, because I can't convince you to change anything by saying, this is what you need to do. You're not going to listen to me.
No.
Yeah.
People take their own paths every time.
People take their own paths. Especially it's like so much of not so much, but I consistently get people who call me and say, my cousin, my son, my grandson, my spouse is in this situation. Oh my heavens, how do we get him help? Kind of, well, let me tell you what's happened to you, and let's make sure that he or she that's in there learns to take the responsibility for what they did, and please don't enable them, but here's what's going to happen. So that's the kind of stuff you get.
So do you mostly handle on the backside after someone's being released? Do you ever work with someone before they're getting incarcerated? In some ways I could see that, if they're facing multiple incarcerations, but even maybe prior to getting incarcerated the first time, do you have people reach out like that? What do we do? How do we help them?
Every once in a while, to be honest with you, yes. I think we haven't really talked about why I chose this direction to do the work that I do. But when I was incarcerated, I had a profound kind of insight about what I had done and why I had done what I'd done. And I spent 5 of my 7 years in a maximum security prison. And one of the things that I thought about when I left was I'm going to start an agency that kind of does exactly that helps people as they get out of incarceration. And I was fortunate enough to have one of those case managers at Max who was going to graduate school at NNU. And I thought, man, you're an old dude like me, man. What are you doing going to graduate school? And he goes, no, I'm going to be a counselor. I said, well, I should be a social worker. So I applied to NNU and got accepted to NNU and left incarceration. I went to NNU to go to school for social work. And from that standpoint, I thought, well, first of all, I started a Facebook page to kind of thank all the people that came out to our little entity and kind of helped us at Max. And from that became a nonprofit. But one of my business model for that nonprofit was to go to churches per se, or even to attorneys to say, you don't know anything about prison, and I do. So just pay me and I will help your clients understand going to prison. Or to the pastor say, why don't you just give me some money every month and then you won't have to answer these questions about little Johnny who's going to prison. I'll do that for you. I'll do that for you. It wasn't a bad model. It actually worked for a while, but there wasn't a necessary living at it. But I did that for a while, and that was the model, essentially, of my small nonprofit.
Nice.
But then somewhere down the line, I'd been doing it for a couple of years, a pastor approached me and said, hey, the Catholics are doing this thing where they want to start a group, interdenominational, where they want to help people coming out of prison. Will you represent me? And I said, sure. And so that's how I got involved with St. Vincent de Paul. I was representing him. And so we started a group almost 12 years ago now, that where we took referrals from people coming out of prison, and then we went out and saw them as Vincentians and as members of St. Vincent de Paul, and helped them with help with their rent, bicycles, and clothing vouchers. And so 2 of us would go out and visit them once they called in for the helpline. And man, I fell in love with it, and it was a great idea. And I'm still a member of that group now. And that group still does go out and do that. It's called St. Dismas now. But it has grown into a situation in which for the St. Vincent de Paul of Southwest Idaho, it's a council. There's made up of 12 different conferences, and we have our own reentry programs, and those are the programs I direct. Nice. So it's grown into that.
You mentioned bikes, and just a quick side tangent, there's the Boise Bike Project and Nampa Bike Project. Do you partner with stuff like that?
Well, the Boise Bicycle Project used to help us originally with it. The Nampa Bike Project is now Mark Person, who does his bikes on the inside of the prison. So, but by and large, we do our own bikes too. We put bikes together down at several of the stores, and so people donate bikes, and those are the bikes we tend to give away first. But yes, we certainly work with Boise Bicycle Project and the Nampa Project. So the Nampa Project is run by a gentleman by the name of Mark Person, who puts those together in Idaho's correctional center out there in a prison, and he does that and he gives them away. So it's weird. People who work with people coming out of prison are, it's a small network of people, but we all work together.
Yeah.
We have to, really, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you do. I'm a little curious with how fast technology is moving. How does that affect people coming out of incarceration? Because someone coming out right now who's unfamiliar with AI is going to be at a disadvantage.
Well, I think the example I would use is I went from I think this is 14 years ago. I went from a bachelor's years and years ago to NNU, and I was a Windows 95 guy, and all of a sudden I'm in graduate school. So that was a shock for me back then, but it just continues to grow. People come out with different levels of expertise. And so keep in mind, some of these people who've done, like being away from society for 10 years and not even knowing how to check your groceries out at Winco or at Albertsons, what you have to do now that with this card that these guys haven't seen, or with these phones that they haven't seen. So it's a real adjustment for some people.
So I know very little about the prison system, especially on the inside. The most I've ever done is I looked at getting hired at Idaho Department of Corrections. So I went and toured. I forget which one, but I went and toured and ended up getting a job offer elsewhere. So I didn't proceed with it. But
they probably still hire you. They're looking for people.
I still get emails all the time. But I'm curious, what does it look like on the inside? What are some of those programs to help prepare?
Yeah, it's gotten a lot better in terms, especially with the technology stuff. I think they're about to get their own iPads now and stuff like that. So it's gotten much, much better than it was when I was in there. And they're working on making that transition easier for us. But again, you can't minimize the fact that what they've been away from and what they have to adjust to on the coming back in. I'm a part of a group called the Douglas Project that is a national organization that takes people inside the prison. So what we will do, and I'm there, they're linked where you sign up as a group or as a church group, and then we go in ISCC, which is Idaho State Correctional Center, and then we visit there and take a tour, and then we talk about, giving exposure to people on the inside about going into prison. So, there's all those kinds of things.
Do they have actual classes? Like, can you pursue a degree or pursue anything?
Inside? Yes, you can now. Actually, it's gotten pretty sophisticated. Some of the prisons down here, Lewis and Clark is a supporter in doing classes here. Up north in Orofino, the University of Idaho has classes that go into Orofino. So it's getting a lot more enlightened, if you will, for that. Whereas when I was in there, we couldn't do that.
You mentioned earlier that ramen costs so much more in there than out. And that makes me question, is like an education in there more expensive than it would be on the outside? No,
it's the same, actually. It's the same cost. They do Pell Grants and everything now, too. So
nice.
Yeah, but the stuff that normally you and I would purchase on the outside, much more expensive in there because it goes out to bid to a contractor, and then the contractor is it's like only being able to go to Albertsons to buy everything. So it's not Albertsons, but there's a company that has the bid, wins the bid. So that makes it difficult.
I'm going to sound very ignorant.
No, that's right.
What does it look like to buy stuff inside? Is it like just a store?
You'd be surprised at what you can purchase. Yeah, it's more limited in terms of the stuff that you can get, but you actually can get ice cream and all sorts of stuff if you have enough money. But keep in mind, if I'm working in the prison system for the most part, and I'm going to say for the most part, because there are people who go out into the community and work at some of the what we call CRC centers where they actually are in the community working and they go back there at night. But if you're in the major facilities out there, most you're going to make is 30 cents an hour working someplace. So you're going to be cleaning up, or like for me, I was the librarian at Max for almost 5 years. So I only made 30 cents an hour. So that's not a lot of money to buy ramens or anything else that you really want. So again, family has to support, family has to help. And you have to buy what you need in terms of radios or shoes or stuff above and beyond what the state gives you.
A couple things come to mind there. One is, don't we have minimum wage laws? Why is that different incarcerated?
Keep in mind, you're not a individual. You are property of the state of Idaho. I was 74975. So you sign up. You don't have many of those rights once you're inside there. You need to do what they ask you to do. So yeah, that doesn't jive with the rest of the world.
I guess what I'm asking is, should it a little bit? Like 30 cents seems.
Well, again, I think what you can do, and this is to Idaho's credit, there are what we call community resource centers in which there are minimum custody people who. There's one in Napa, there's one in Boise, there's one in East Boise for women, there's one in St. Anthony's, in which people can go there, and those are minimum custody people that go out into the community and work, and they get fairly good wages, and they come back in. Now, do they give a percentage of their wages to to the landlord, who is to the Department of Corrections? Yes, they do. But they walk out with a good chunk of change in terms of doing that. So you're in the prison system, you got to work towards getting your custody level as low as you can so that you can go out and participate in those situations. Example, that would be with St. Vincent de Paul. I want to say at this point in time, I want to say 8 people who are housed at the South Idaho Correctional Institution, which we call SICKI, or the farm, work in the thrift stores. So they get in a van and they go into the thrift stores and work during the day, and they go back to the facility at night and they work in the thrift stores. There's a gentleman on our staff that lives at Treasure Valley CRC, and he works for us on the inside and helps those ladies in the inside, as well as our kind of blending back into community, if you will. And he lives there and has lived there for 20 years.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's kind of neat.
You mentioned like they can save up a chunk of change,
yes,
and sometimes get that. So do they have access to like banks, or is there like a department correction type of bank?
They put money in their own bank accounts. Sure. They do that. Sure. Because they're getting close to release. So they've got money and they're making their own paths and making plans for their release. I picked people up from incarceration at one of those CRCs and took them to like Peterson Chevrolet, where they were working, or not Peterson Toyota, I think it was, where he was working, and he actually paid cash for a car and went ahead and moved on and was going to make that transition back into the community. The interesting thing about that, though, too, is if you think about it, if that person does not really recognize that he'd been away for 15 years. If he's not ready to make that transition, just having all the money in the world isn't necessarily the plan for success. He really needs to be ready emotionally to make that transition back. Is he ready to face those things like housing and relationship issues and those sorts of things? So in some cases, I always wonder what happened to him, okay? But my guess was his life was not as smooth as he thought it was going to be. It's just not as smooth. Something always comes up and catches us, and then we say, wow, what am I going to do? And how do I process this? Like everybody else in life.
Yeah. I guess what comes to mind is one of the ways of preparing people is like a lot of people don't even know how to maintain a budget.
Yep.
So,
but they do that in classes. They have classes in which they talk about it, and they're in each one of the institutions. That's a part of their release plan, is to give them some exposure to that. Again, you have to. This is not to diminish what they're saying or doing as they come forward. You're inside and you have nothing to do during the day, and so you go to those classes and you listen. But are you truly listening to what's going on when you're in there? You're thinking, I got to do this, I got to do this. I'm listening to it, but am I retaining it? Am I really understanding it? My guess is once you get out, it's much, much different. And you think, boy, I should have listened to this. Boy, I should have taken more of those classes. Boy, I should have gone by Mark's place, but I didn't. My girlfriend picked me up and we just went out and I bought a car, and now it's somewhere down the line. I'm thinking, wow, I don't know how to do this. So those are things that people who live inside the system now need to take advantage of, and to take charge of their own life, to understand that it's on them. It's not on me or you or the rest of society. But too many people don't do that.
Yeah. I think even outside of the prison system, I haven't liked the way a lot of degrees or jobs have gone. I think book learning is great, but I think things ran a lot smoother when we were almost under like an apprenticeship model, because you're a lot more hands-on. You build that muscle memory actually doing something so that you don't have to think about it. You just do it. And I'm wondering if some of that, putting it actually in action and having some of that community like you would with a mentor or like master under like an apprenticeship under a master or something.
Well, I think that's the way, almost, you think about it, that's the way everybody learns. It's like, I can't say to my staff, do it exactly this way. I have to sit and say, here are the things I would work on if I were you, and then let them proceed and learn how to do that on their own, and then kind of step in when you see something that's going awry. So, but that's with everything in life. So in some ways, there is a program through the state of Idaho, Department of Correction, called Free to Succeed, in which residents, as they're released, can apply for a mentor, and that mentor can come alongside and help them. Again, I'm trying to get you to picture a person that's just gotten out, that's been locked up for you name the time. Their first instinct is not to come into my office and say, I've been reading about this Dave Ramsey guy. Can you tell me about how I can save money? And they're not going to do that. That's okay. They're right out. They're free. They want to eat. They want to eat at Taco Bell or wherever they wanted to do, and they're going right back to some freedom. They've been locked up, and they tend to overlook some of the stuff that are the logical things that they need to do. Now, do we need to have those classes available for them and when they're ready for them? Yes, we do, and we need to have those things, but they're not going to make those choices right off. At least my experience isn't they're not going to make those choices right off.
No, it's like taking a kid into a candy store, and giving them $100. Go do whatever you want.
It's right. There's a great story that I tell sometimes, and is the fact that I'd picked this one gentleman up, and he was going to Coeur d'Alene, and so he was taking an early bus to Coeur d'Alene, and I took him down to the old bus station what we used to have downtown Boise, and I dropped him off, and I said, okay, here. He goes, I'm okay. I can get the bus from here. And I said, okay, fine. And I always give him my card and say, if you run across problems, give me a call. But he called me the next day, and he said, I almost missed the bus. And I said, how? He goes, I went right up to the door, and I was waiting by the door, and I stood in there by the door, and finally the guy came over to me and says, are you going to go out there and get on that bus? And he said, aren't you going to open the door? He goes, pushes the door, and the door all he had to do was push the door open, but he was waiting for the door, for them to open up the door so he could go out and get on the bus. So it's you're just not aware of what roadblocks you're going to run across, and you're just not aware of the different things that people are going to be faced with and how they're going to approach it and how they're going to deal with it.
I'm curious if there's some way to create like a transition program where you're not like directly just go from full-time in prison to released and now you're out there.
Well, I think that's what the state would say. That's what the CRCs are. I would tell you that's what my program is. I mean, we try to help you the whole way. We will do absolutely anything for you. If I can see in your heart that you really want to change your life, then through St. Vincent de Paul, I can pretty much get anything you want for you. But I have to see in your heart that that's really what you want to do. I have to see you're engaged. That's something that you want to do. But when you start saying, I got this, I'm good, then depending on how you say that, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'll be here next time when you get out, and I'll pick you up again. Okay, and maybe you'll learn at that time.
Yeah.
Because it's really the onus of learning all this stuff is up to you. It's up to me. And it took me a long time to learn, so I'm sure that it takes different people, different degrees of time to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I forget the statistic, but the vast majority of people don't change unless something critical will happen if you don't. Like you could have someone, let's say, wanting to quit smoking, but they won't ever do it until a doctor tells them you quit or you die. Like those are your two options.
Well, I think that's the difficulty we all do. We always put off the things that we're afraid of. The key in life, I think, is to say, I'm afraid of this, but walk towards it because it's never as bad as you think it's going to be. And frankly, if you start doing that, the fun in life is walking towards doing that and overcoming it. So picture, hey, you and I together. I get this call from you saying, hey, come and do this podcast. I go, I have a radio show. I have a voice for radio. I am great. I look terrible on video. So I'm scared to death driving over here today thinking, what in the world? I'll go over here and make a fool of myself and talk to this guy that I don't even know just because two people say he's a nice guy, And so it's fearful, but you go and you overcome it and you just process it and we'll see what happens. Who knows what happens? Maybe somebody picks this up and learns something. I hope that's the case. But that's why you do stuff like that. Yeah. That becomes the excitement. That becomes, if you will, a better high than drinking or drugging or doing that. That becomes the excitement in life.
Yeah. I have a couple things rattling around trying to connect right now. One is Kimbra had told me, and Gigi, the power of your story is not in the story itself, but in sharing it. It goes back to that community, what you can bring together. And that gives hope. And that builds on the community aspect. But then the other flip side of that is one thing I've had to change my approach on is many of us learn to be afraid of failure. It's like, I talked about this with Ben Blessing, who I had on. He brought up, like, we don't remember what it was like to learn how to walk.
Mm-hmm.
If we had given up every time we failed, we would have never walked.
I never walked.
But that somewhere along the line, we learned to be afraid of failure, and we shouldn't be, because you learn more in failing than you ever learn in success. And so if we can not face failure as this just doom and gloom end to everything, but view it as a way to learn and move forward and grow, then we're more willing to face those challenges. Yeah, I can be a bit of a perfectionist, and I was terrified to start this podcast. It's like, I need to be the perfect speaker first, the better interviewer, know how to tell stories and narrative. And it's like, I'm never going to learn that unless I just put one foot in front of the other, do it, learn, and iterate.
Yeah, I do. It's the same way. I started the same way too. When I started my radio show, I started a radio show in 2016, and I had a good friend that was on the radio, and I would come in on his radio show on Wednesdays, and he would talk, and then I would be his foil, kind of. We talked about addiction, really. And so I had just started with St. Vincent de Paul, and somebody from the national St. Vincent de Paul came out and said, hey, if we gave you a little bit of extra money, what would you do with it? And I said, well, I don't think anybody in the state knows what it's like to be incarcerated. I'd try to educate them. And so they gave us a little bit of money, and that was really one of our first kind of pieces of money. And so I went into my friend at the radio, and he goes, hey, let's do a radio show. And I said, okay, yeah, that'd be great. And so here I'm used to sitting with him for 30 minutes and kind of working off his lead, because he's the radio guy and he's the voice of all this stuff. And so he puts me in the studio and he sets it all up and he pushes this button. He says, okay, now talk for 30 minutes and I'll come back and get you. And I go, what are you talking about, talk for 30? Where are you going? He goes, well, this is your radio show, do it and let me know how it works. Now, from that beginning, I'm over 500 shows now, and I love it, okay? And I get to bring in guests, and I've got a format, and I've built it up. And, every once in a while somebody goes, I recognize that voice. Or they'll come out of prison, and they'll say, I listen to you all the time. I go, I've been looking for you, who listens to me all the time. I can't even get my own wife to listen to me. So, it's just doing it. And see over and over again. And then if you do it long enough, man, you become a credible voice. So, now I've had every director of the Department of Corrections on, and I got senators on, and I got governor on, and, I got all kinds of people on the radio. So, and I'm in awe. They want to come in and talk to me, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. So, but you just keep after it.
Yeah. I've had several people. When I reached out to you, I was like, there's no way you're going to say yes and come on.
Well, I gotta be honest with you. Gigi is somebody I respect and I like. Okay, I love the work she does. Kimber Shaw she's one of the sweetest ladies in the Valley, and so I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. And I basically, if those ladies ask me to do something, I do it. So it was a combination of, yeah, okay, let's see what happens, and we'll go from there. But
yeah,
who knows what happens from this? You may be the next Joe Rogan, and then I'll be one of the. I can say I knew you in.
That would be amazing. I'm not going to bank on that. I can hope for it, but
yeah, that's all right.
No, I had Gigi on, and I'm actually going to have Doug on soon.
Doug
Chris, Gigi's husband.
Yeah, he's got almost as good a story.
Yeah, he agreed to come on. We're getting him scheduled, and
you will like him.
I think at some point I will be having Kimber on.
Yep.
She's probably the person, ironically, that intimidates me the most. She's the nicest person.
She's all right.
But she has such a high bar she does so great that you want to do justice to that. And so it's more like that same fear of I need to be better at my game so that I'm good enough
she's a sweetie.
to have her on.
She's a sweetie. She's been on my show. You'll be all right. You'll be fine. Yeah, no, that's okay. That'll be good. You'll be fine. She'll be fine.
Yeah, it's
just getting her booked.
We worked with Gigi and Kimbra for a couple years. And
well, the hard thing with all these things is to get somebody, it's like you, it's like to get the right person booked in and get them to do it. So I was totally surprised that, we have a new Department of Corrections director, and her name's Bree Derrick. I knew her as when she was a deputy director. I think we were friends. And so she had just gotten the gig, and I said, hey, look, let's come back on the radio. And so, And so she said, I was trying to schedule her, and she said, look, you're booked for 2. You got me for 2 hours. And so we did 2 shows right back to back. And I went with her and I said, here are the things I just want to talk to you about, and here's the things I want to talk to you about on the radio. And she goes, just ask me everything. So, I mean, she was comfortable enough that we just did that, and we did 2 shows together.
Nice.
And that was one of the first pieces that she'd done when she was director. So that just happens. It's okay.
Yeah.
It'll come.
I am a little curious. 2 pieces come to mind going back to the prison system.
Mm-hmm.
When you're released, is there any sort of like parole where you have to check in, like you have to stay, let's say you're released in Idaho, you have to stay in Idaho for a certain period of time?
It's different with each person, but by and large, if you're released on parole in the state of Idaho, you need to report to a PO within 48 hours. And then you essentially are following there's like 27 little different things that you have to do once you sign before you leave. And most of those involve understanding that you're still not free. You're part of the correctional system, and you have to fulfill all the rules of your parole until it's completed. You really have no rights. You can't vote, you can't do anything, and you do need to touch base before you leave any county. County is not the right word, any district. There's 7 districts, so I can't. The hard part for me, I know, was I paroled to the Boise area, and I'd been accepted into graduate school at NNU, and that's in District 3. So I'm in District 4 and District 3, and I went to my PO, and I said, hey, I'm going to go to graduate school in the fall. She goes, no, you're not. You can't. That's in District 3. You can't do that. I go, well, I've already been accepted. She goes, well, no, you can't. You can't do that. But, I mean, eventually I got it. But it's like that's the attitude. No, you can't do that. I have to approve that. So it's a little bit of, you have to talk to your PO and get them to trust you and to understand that you're not going to do something that embarrasses them. And then you get more and more freedom as you go by.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I ask that is I'm a little curious if like you interact in other states too. Like, do you have people that come out of, I don't know, Oregon, since it's close, and then come over? Because I know you have the Oregon Department of Corrections right across the border. And I know a lot of families live, especially when you're right just on a border, if the family's living, say, in Fruitland, but they were incarcerated in Ontario, like
then those guys would need to report to the Oregon system. We wouldn't take them back unless they filed for an interstate compact kind of situation. And the likelihood that somebody from Oregon would come back to Idaho is very unlikely because, again, Idaho is more restrictive.
Yeah.
So it's more likely that Idaho would try to get into Oregon because it would be a less restrictive situation. Yeah. But if you're in Idaho, we tend not to let you go away from Idaho. Yeah.
So in what ways do we interact with the other states then?
When we first asked me that question, I thought you were talking about whether I interacted with other stuff. We will, if somebody is released and they apply for an interstate compact and they want to go, let's say, to Arizona because that's where their family, if they go there, then their whole parole situation transfers with them. And then they're under the auspices of the Arizona system. So they just totally give that up.
It's just a transfer.
It's just a transfer.
Okay.
Yeah, but they have to be approved, and there's a dollar figure involved in terms of the application.
My thought in asking that goes to families like you mentioned, because if families are having to help support some, like let's say they're not earning enough, they want to buy that ramen.
Mm-hmm.
I know some families will move close to whatever prison they're incarcerated at.
It's true.
But some families may not be able to afford to move or like,
yeah,
how
but I
does
think
all that play?
those guys will they'll take the money from any place to put on what's called the books, so that you can purchase stuff. So they'll take money from anywhere. Just a matter of, grandparents will send money and from wherever. It just doesn't matter. They don't have to live in the state to support them.
Okay.
Yeah. That's pretty simple.
But if they don't move to be next to the prison, let's say their family lives in Oregon, but they commit the crime in Idaho, so they end up in the Idaho prison.
Mm-hmm.
But family can't move, but then you're in Idaho. You said they could transfer over to Oregon
upon parole.
Upon
parole, yeah. But the Oregonians could come see them in Idaho prison, but once it was over with, they'd have to get the approval for Idaho to get transferred to Oregon, if that was their residence.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of also asking, like you mentioned, if you personally interact, in what capacity do you do that? Is that gaining ideas from how other
I think
systems?
part of the, like I said, part of the most important work I do is to link with other people who have been incarcerated on a national level. There are organizations that I work with. There's a great organization called Just Leadership USA, in which I was a fellow it's based in New York City, but what they do is train people who've been incarcerated to be better leaders. And so I was a part of their 2018 cohort, in which I went back to New York like 5 times in 2018 and did weekend kinds of seminars at John Jay University. And I came out of that with a link and an association with other people who have been incarcerated all across the country. So I think that group, they do like 35 people a year or so. And so that group is now up to probably 200 people across the country that are almost like a fraternity of us who have been, supported by that organization. And then I mentioned Frederick Douglass Project, which is an organization on a national level that if your church group wants to go inside, let's say Idaho State Correctional Center, then we set up a visit where we all come in, they get a tour, and then I facilitate the discussion with that situation. So I do that for Frederick Douglass Association, which, again, Washington-based national organization. In some ways, the Valley here in Idaho is a small group of people who work with those of us who've been incarcerated, but on a national level, there's half a dozen or so people who do that advocacy. And I stay on top of all that stuff and try to work with all that stuff to make it more credible.
Nice.
For the work I do and to help me become a better leader.
Yeah. You mentioned like churches getting involved doing tours.
Absolutely.
When they do a tour, like, do they get to sit down? I mean, you see in movies or TV shows, a criminal tells their story. This is what I was in here. Here's the mistakes I made. Avoid these. Mm-hmm. Is it go in and just like a tour, not interact with people? What does that look like?
The Frederick Douglass Project has a church group, and you can apply for that. Or when at the end of this, if you let people know how to reach me, you can reach out to me, and I can set your group up with them. But they go into a facility in which you take a tour of the prison, and then you sit with 15 or so of their in-house mentors, and you interact with them just to see the idea is to make the community and the population understand that everybody that's inside there, they're human beings. They're just like you. They're going to be released. Everybody in Idaho that's in prison, 98% of the people who live out in the desert out there in Kuna, they're going to come back to the community and be your neighbors. You may not know that, but that's what's going to happen. All of them are coming back. So this is a way to bring those people in and to get a chance to interact with them and see that they're just human beings. They're just like that odd cousin Sally or whatever, so you get a chance to see them as human beings.
Yeah. I'm curious if that can also be used to foster more community, and maybe
Absolutely.
You make some friends, and then
absolutely.
They have
another
landing board.
At the end of that group, then people come and say, how can I help? And then I plug them into other things. St. Vincent de Paul does a program every year now. It's called Cookies for Corrections, in which what we do is we give 24 cookies to 6,000 people every year at Christmas. And so we raise the cookies and put them together, and then we take volunteers from the community and have them go out and give a bag of cookies to every inmate. So, and it's done with volunteers, so that a volunteer comes in from a church group that says, Merry Christmas, God loves you, with a bag of cookies. So that's really powerful to do. So you can imagine, started out as called Cookies for Max is what we called it when I was there, and it was very powerful. And so when I got out, we kind of kept it going. It kind of lost some favor, but it's back up now, and we started doing it max. Then we started the women's prison, and last year we did 6,000 inmates, and we'll do it with probably 175 people who will sign up, and they'll go out, and they'll get to go out and hand out cookies. So it's really sort of powerful, and people, you got to watch the eyes of the people who do this. They get charged up about it because they get to go out and see people and hand them cookies and say, hey, Merry Christmas. God loves you, and for the most part. Yeah, because it's usually church groups that do it.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of church groups, or do you have to kind of scout out and try and get people involved?
I think it's more about finding the people who really want to get involved with it. I think most church groups wouldn't mind doing it at all. It's just a matter of churches are a lot like other organizations. You really have to become credible in a church organization before they're really going to say, who is this dude with the white hair that wants me to give him money and to take cookies? I have to work to become credible enough for them to do that. But in the Treasure Valley, there are probably 20 or 25 different groups that help me get 6,000 cookies together every year. I mean, that's a lot of cookies if you think about it.
Yeah. I was thinking
it's
back.
A lot of Chips Ahoy's and a lot of, Hydrox Oreo cookies that I've got. I have 6,000 of those guys.
Yeah. So are they all like pre-made like Oreos?
Yeah,
or
no, they have to be store-bought.
Okay. I was going to assume you can't trust. You don't know if like someone's putting something in them.
Yeah, it used to be. And the great thing about it, and when it was Cookies for Max, it was homemade cookies. And I was the librarian, so I would get 20,000 cookies at Max, and it was my job to break them up and put them in bags so that when the volunteers came in to hand them out, they'd be ready, and they were all homemade. And it was like some fudge came in, all sorts of stuff came in. But somewhere along the line, something happened that didn't go right, and so it is now store-bought cookies only. So, but if you think about it, store-bought cookie for somebody that's been done 10 years or 5 years, they're pretty excited just to see a Chips Ahoy cookie or to see an Oreo, a real Oreo, as opposed to something else. So it still works the same way, and it's still the same concept. It's me sitting in a prison knowing that, there are people out there who really are thinking about me and who think that I'm still of value, and I like that. That's positive. So it's a real win-win for absolutely everybody.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about like churches going in. Do you ever get other organizations? Because I know there's been a huge emphasis, let's say in the corporate world, on adding volunteer hours to people where you can take time off work and go volunteer.
We're doing a little bit of that in terms of taking people in that are looking for employment. So from that vein, because employment's really something that people are still after to finding quality people. A lot of times those navigators that we talked about before will bring an employer in to meet a specific person so they can hire them. But for the most part, if one of those corporations wants to do volunteer hours for work, selfishly, I plug them into a St. Vincent de Paul project, or I help them build a fence for us, or do our pantry work, or do something like that. That's where we tend to do it. I'm not sure that anybody's going out and just doing that in the prison.
Okay. I was thinking of like the handing out cookies and stuff. Send volunteers in for that.
Believe me, it's about from this time going forward when we're taping this through the rest of the year, almost everybody I run into says, Mark, by the way, I want to go in this year. And so I think this year we've finally gotten to the part where you go to my website now and you sign up electronically so that I don't have to keep track of everybody in terms of when they're going to show up and what they're going to do. So it's very, very popular.
It's mostly just an awareness as people have become aware of it.
Yeah, they hear. I mean, people, like I say, within the last couple of weeks, almost everybody I run across will say, oh, by the way, I was starting to think about cookies. When do we have to start giving you cookies now? And I want to go into this facility. And so it's like, this is the busy part of the rest of the year for me now will be the busy part of trying to get 6,000 cookies by December the 15th, I think it is this year.
A lot of cookies.
It's a lot of cookies.
I'm having trouble organizing my thoughts because I have so many questions.
Sure. We shrink wrap them and put them on pallets, and then we take them to each institution. And then each institution divides up however they want to do it to disperse them. Some will use staff, some will use volunteers within their structure, some will use residents to put it together. But each institution is just a little bit different, so we try not to impose upon that. So we let them put it together, and then Idaho puts together. They do the bags, but we just bring these shrink wrap pallets full of Oreo cookies and Chips Ahoy cookies, and so they divide them up for us. And then I bring the volunteers in, so all they do is just pick the bags up and go and do it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really a really positive thing. We've got, if you go to our website, you can see some of the videos on. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah. I remember when I was a teenager, my youth group at church, they did two things. It was kind of, they wanted you to experience, kind of like you talked about, go in, see what these people experience. But I don't know what can be done with kids. So as teenagers, what we did, two things. One was for homelessness. One was kind of for prison. And so you had like a we're going to turn the parking lot, you're going to bring cardboard boxes and build a little house, or we're going to set up areas and you're not allowed to leave this area for the next day or two, kind of to, I mean, it's not going to be anything like, but to simulate kind of as best you can as a teenager. But I'm curious, like when you have people that want to go in, is this only adults? Is there restrictions around that?
You have to be over 18 to go in. Yeah, there's stuff. Yeah, certainly restrictions in terms of going in. And not to be honest with you, they used to be more restrictive on it, but they know what we're doing now, so we've got it down. They know we're not going to abuse it, and it's all set up. So we've got it pretty well down. But you mentioned a way in which, and we've talked about this a little bit off and on about learning. There's a great exercise that it simulates prison, and you can simulate a prison with the rules of prison and all these different rules, like almost like Monopoly. And a lot of times it'll be legislators or free people that don't have anything to understanding about prison, and it's run by people. We tend to run it by staff who've been incarcerated, so that you get a certain amount. They say, here's your money, and you've got to go do this, 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 and this, and you have to see what it's like to survive on parole. So you have to go get a drug test here, you have to check housing, and you have to go around and do all these things, and you only have so much time, and it's very interesting to watch that process. Legislators will participate in it. Staff will participate in it. And I think it's actually something that many of the staff in Idaho Department of Corrections utilize, because they switches it around and you see what you have to do to survive on parole. It's a real eye-opener and a testimony to how difficult it is to do what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great way to learn.
Is there stuff like that you can... Since teenagers, for instance, or kids can't go in and experience that, are there like existing patterns programs that, like if a youth group wanted to do something like that they could?
Well, if a youth group wanted to do something like that, I think you should probably, I hesitate to say call me and I would find a group that would do that. I'm not so sure that it would be something we would do. We'd love to do that for the right adult group or the right church group, or the right Department of Corrections organization that wanted to do that. And we participate in those things all the time. But in some ways, you're saying youth, but again, so much of my work is dealing with trying to educate people and trying to change the system. That it's not that we don't want to work with younger people, it's that the mandate really is to start letting somebody know what's really going on inside there. So if I can get decision makers or adults to understand, and they vote, they will talk, they will change something. And that's frankly the direction and the drive, if you will, that I still have to fix that. Yeah.
The reason I bring up kids is twofold. One, I don't know if you have much familiarity with, say, juvenile corrections versus the prison system, but then also one of the biggest ways to change things is through educating kids or youth. Yeah. If you can break that before someone's in a hard pattern of expectations.
Yeah, at this point, we give juveniles up to different organizations because so many of the people that work for me have been incarcerated that it needs to be adults.
Yeah.
So, and it's just a different dynamic, different total state agency, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure there's somebody that does what I do there.
I'm sure there is. I'll have to look them up. I've been very curious and interested in things like this. Are you familiar with the Nazarene Church?
Yeah, absolutely. I went to NNU.
Yeah, I grew up Nazarene. A lot of people don't know the Nazarene Church was founded originally to reach out to recovering addicts. Mm-hmm. So they're very adjacent to that space. Most people in the Nazarene Church aren't even aware of that anymore.
It's true.
So I feel like there's always been a leaning for that church to help out in those areas and be aware.
I totally agree with you. Some of the biggest supporters are two of the facilities that are Nazarene churches that support us on an ongoing basis. So yeah, that's no problem. It's like I said, it's a different navigating the way to have a church make the decision to support any project takes some time. So, yeah. I mean, I went to one of the people who supported me the most when I got out of incarceration was a place called Common Ground Biker Church, which is made up of a bunch of motorcyclists at some point in time. And it was a great program, and I was there for like 13 years, and it just disbanded about 3 years ago. And that really kick-started my work because they were just really good people and they supported us. And one of the pastor was a volunteer in the prison system, so he helped me tremendously. But once it's left, I've gone to a different church now, and so I've been there about 3 years, and I can just tell you that it's a great church. But getting them to understand and take the steps to kind of support us, it's a work, and it's just work to get credible enough to do it.
Yeah.
So when you try to do that with 3 or 4 different churches, it's like when they almost have to see you all the time, you have to be after them all the time. You have to be on a committee, Yeah.
Yeah.
It's work.
I have been in a couple different churches, but mostly the Nazarene churches. I grew up an Air Force kid, so I moved around growing up. But the ones that always seemed the most involved to me were the Nazarene churches, just because that's what I had most visibility into. But the reason I say that is if you think of like we're all the body of Christ, to use that language, certain body parts do different areas. Have you noticed do certain denominations have more focus in one area?
Well, I guess certainly one of my biggest supporters let's say for cookies is the Catholic Church, because most St. Vincent de Paul's are associated with the Catholic Church, but they are certainly the strong supporter. But LDS churches have come out unbelievably supportive of us, and then the Calvary system has come out really in support of us. So it's all of us in different places. It's whoever that works for me that goes to a different church that we can make inroads with to say, hey, can we make a presentation? And then we just put the boxes out, and it goes from us. 10 Mile Christian is one that just absolutely, what we never talked about, I think, was when I was at Max, I was a part of a faith-based program that was called Hope Community, and it was an experiment for 3 years in which we did a faith-based community inside a maximum security prison. And we were there for 3.5 years or so. And we had volunteers from throughout the valley, religious volunteers come in and share. But the people who kick-started that for us and made it really work was 10 Mile Christian, because they gave us each a mentor. There were 36 of us in that program. And so they gave us a mentor. So I had an individual mentor that came out and saw me basically every week for 3.5 years. So, and it wasn't going to visiting. He would come down onto where we lived in the tier and sit with us and talk with us. And that was the same way for all 36 of us. So that's pretty powerful. And that's really why I started the nonprofit that I did, was because of that total experience. Yeah. And so in some ways, 10 Mile Steve Moore was the man who said, hey, look, the Catholics are doing this. Why don't you represent me? And that's what got me going. So on all of this. So it's always been I've been blessed to have doors open for me that once I decided to change my life, that I cannot believe how fortunate I've become. So, and I get to sit here with you now.
Yeah. I'm honored that you came.
How about
that? The reason I asked kind of like around denominations is, we all have different strengths and can naturally be drawn to certain things. So like Gigi talked about doing the regeneration program at Rock Harbor.
Yeah. Rock Harbor's just like a superstar in churches.
Yeah.
But let's use Rock Harbor as an example. It's like I love the pastor of Rock Harbor, okay? But they are getting so big, so quick. And to get in Keith's agenda I'm 3 years plus, kind of just getting to where I can get to talk to him, okay? And he's a really nice guy, and I would love to have him help us. And if he just did a little bit, then we would be fantastic. But I know many of his staff. I know a couple of his elders, but I'm still not there. And heck, he's from Kansas. I'm from Kansas. We should just sit down and talk, Keith and me. We've met a couple times, but, it's like it hasn't happened yet. But he is on my bucket list he's one of those giants that I want to get on my radio show, and I want to get involved in more prison stuff. And so if Gigi does the regeneration out there at the prison, which she told me today she was going to do, then that might be our lead in to kind of do a little bit more work with them.
Nice.
Yeah.
I know she had mentioned they've been trying to reach out to other churches to bring the regeneration program.
Yeah, they will
and
get
they've
that.
struggled to find other churches that want to do it because they're all like, we don't have the resources. You're already doing it. We can just send people over to
That's
you.
it. We always send, it's like I send people there now too. They'll say, where do I go? And I say, well, Thursday night, go see Gigi. Friday, go to Celebrate Recovery. Yeah, you just get a list of what you kind of send people to.
Yeah. One of the things I've learned that's been really great on the podcast is I'm starting to be able to make those connections between different people where it's like, here's a resource, here's someone I've run into, and getting that, I guess, networking has been really cool to connect people.
That is everything that we do is. That's all it's about. And it's being honest in your interactions and doing it in a way that, energizes people to believe what you believe and then go forward. It's telling your stories. That's the thing that attracted me to this. Who knows, this story may spark something for me to get an expansion of some aspect of our work, if I hope so. Or it may reach just that one person that says, maybe I ought to kind of address this stuff in my life and go here or go there, or maybe I am a little bit responsible for some of the stupid stuff I've done in my life that sent me to prison. I need to take a look at it.
Yeah. One more quick question, then I want to pivot a little bit.
Okay.
St. Vincent de Paul, I don't know if I said that correctly.
Right. You're good.
That's, of course, denominational to the Catholic Church, but do you work with other denominations, like bring under that, kind of like Love Inc., where it was?
Sure. It's a great question. St. Vincent de Paul, you're right, it's like when they call them conferences, and they're usually attached to a parish. And so it's like the parish will do what they do in terms of greeting Catholics on church, but then when they need people that are people in need, they send them to St. Vincent de Paul, and that's what they do, is to support people who are in need. Again, when we've talked about before, when that gentleman said the Catholics are doing something different with reentry, this is the conference that I'm part of that got all this started was a conference that was not attached to a parish, and it was interdenominational. And so we got together, first 20 of us, and we were not all Catholic. We were just going to help people coming out of incarceration. It was started by two people. One was retiring prison ministry gentleman from the Catholic Church, and the other was the gentleman from St. Vincent de Paul, and they started it. But since that time, it's grown, and our reentry program, all the people that work for us, and I think we number about 14 in just reentry, there's probably only one Catholic working for us. So it's total interdenominational, and the support we get is, I would send people to Rock Harbor, I would send people to other places, more so than I would necessarily send them to the Catholic Church. But if you come out and you're Catholic, then I'll send you to the Catholic Church. If you come out and you say to me, the bishop says I need to do this, and that means to me it's LDS, and I'd send you to the LDS Church. I'm going to play off what you say to me, okay? Because I don't know what's right for you. You have to tell me what's right for you.
Yeah.
Do I have strong opinions on all that? Absolutely. Okay, but I'm not going to say one way or the other what is the situation for you. So, that's way above my pay grade.
Yeah. My dad gave me a piece of advice that I felt very dear. Like I said, I grew up in the Nazarene church, but there was one place I was living where I wasn't really connecting. And he told me, it's not about the denomination. We're all Christians. What you need, are you growing in your walk with God, and are you growing with others? Are you making that community and interactions? Don't hardline yourself into, you have to be a Nazarene.
Yeah.
Love God and love others, and go where that's going to grow. That's
the simplest way. I don't, there will be people who are these hardliners at Catholic or hardliners LDS, or whatever it is that doesn't get along with them. And I can't legitimately tell you when we're in heaven whether those guys will be there or not, but I certainly hope so. So like I said, it's way above my pay grade. What I know is that I know what I believe, and I know who I follow, and I try to listen to what that Holy Spirit tells me to do, and then I do it. And I'm perfectly happy and comfortable doing that. And that's, do not need to even get into those situations. People who tend to get into those situations really have a tendency not to really do quality work anyway in the rest of their life. So, yeah, I just keep going.
Yeah.
Take it. You can take that and run with that as wherever you want to run with it. I'll just, I'm a simple guy,
I try to be simple. I find I like to trip myself up and make things more complicated than they should be.
If you have a tendency, all you need to do is just listen to that voice that's telling you what to do. That's the Holy Spirit telling you what to do, and then just follow it. It's not, I can tell you that dozens of times, well, that's not true. I'll say several times a day, I will find myself in that situation where I'll say, whoops, that isn't me, that's you. Okay. I'll tell you an example that happened to me last week. It's like, and people who know me tell me I tell these stories all the time, and I probably tell too many of them, but I'm having this perfect day. I mean, it's just a perfect day. Everything had gone well. The people I talked to on the phone, we were doing well. Everything was at work. I had an hour and a half before I needed to be at a 4:00 meeting over at the library. It was like 2:30. And I thought, I'll run to Albertsons, get this. So I run to Albertsons, and I do what I need to do, and I'm almost back to my office, and I say, where's my phone? Where's my phone? And if I lose my phone, I can't tell you what that's about. But I thought, oh man, at the checkout at Albertsons, I left my phone. So I'm almost to my office. I double all the way back over to Broadway, trying to rush in, running through stop signs to get back in, thinking somebody's got to steal my phone. And of course, it's not there. And I'm thinking, what do you mean you took my phone? So I go back and I'm headed back. I'm trying to think of how am I going to get a phone? Did I get that extra plan when I switched my phone over? Is it and I am just panicked. And I walked back in my office and I did something different in my leaving that day and moved my phone to a different place. And there it was sitting there. And so to me, that's God saying, so you think you got your life going here, Mark? Huh? You think you got it in control? Let me tell you, you ain't in control. I'm in control. And that was like the eye-opener that, you know what? Don't do it. Don't tell that story to my wife because I haven't told her that because she thinks I carry that phone around too much. So,
well, if she watches the podcast.
Oh, she never watches my stuff. She worried that today. She said, you're not going to wear those shoes, are you? So hopefully the cameras catch my shoes because I switched shoes for you.
The camera doesn't catch the shoes. It catches about shin up.
Okay, that's great. And she goes, you're not going to wear those shoes over there, are you? So I did go home and change shoes before I came over here.
Nice. Well, I was curious to pick your brain for a little bit of advice, like make that pivot. Is there anything you would tell someone who just is going into prison, maybe like what are the 3 things they should focus on or learn, or what would help them through that?
I think, and it's a difficult spot. You question whether or not, I question if, let's say, if I knew that I was going to get 7 years going into, like I didn't have a choice, I was in county jail. But if I knew and I was released and I didn't know what I was going to get, I knew I was going to get 7 years. Would I run? There's a tendency to want to just skate. But I think I would recognize the fact that it's very hard in that situation to figure out what your role was and what you did wrong. And if I've ever done anything really good in my life, I guess maybe it was when I screwed up. I knew I screwed up, and I knew that when I got caught, I was caught. And so you need to face the reality that this is a situation. And when you made that decision to do this, that this is the consequences of that. So I think you need to come to grips with that and then come to grips with why you did that and start working on how you can fix that in the future. And it's not going to be his fault or her fault. Most of the time that's my fault. And so having an understanding of that and that I'm going to get through this and I'm going to learn from it, because it's not a lot of fun going to prison, but it's also something that you will get through. I know that I sat in Ada County Jail when they sentenced me, and I thought, I'm not sure this 50-year-old can do 7 years in prison, but I didn't have a choice. So, and in the end, it was probably the best 7 years of my life. So I really got a chance to, we've talked about God. I finally got, because some things happened to me where I was accused of something that ironically I did not do. And so I'm in the hole after a year at one prison, and then finally I'm saying, I feel like God's saying to me, I've been trying to get your attention, Mr. Renick, for 50 years. We've got some time now, so let's talk about this. And from that moment, it all changed. Now, he didn't tell me the first part would be that I'd go to maximum security prison, get to live with 500 of the worst people in the state of Idaho, but it worked out okay because things changed. And I got to understand what my role was. I got to understand what his role in my life was. And so it became very powerful. You can get through that, I guess is what I would say for you, and recognize your peace and come to grips with the fact that you've got to do it and change your life, make amends to the people that you hurt, and go forward and try to figure out who you are. That's a simple answer, maybe.
What comes to mind keying off that, are you familiar with Jocko Willink?
I don't think so.
Jocko was a Navy SEAL for 20 years, and now he teaches like leadership seminars and stuff. And him, and I want to say it's Leif Babin, wrote a book called Extreme Ownership, which teaches you to take 100% ownership for everything. If like that's the only way you're going to be a leader. It's not it's Johnny's fault or Sue's fault. You're the leader. It's your responsibility. Even if they made a mistake and it reflected on you, you take ownership. And
Absolutely.
The more you take that extreme ownership, the more you're going to be able to improve and lead and help. So I think that's a huge life skill for everyone.
Oh, I think I totally agree with you. It's like I'm responsible for what everybody does that works for me. And I have to let them go and forward. And if they mess up, then I take responsibility for it. Yeah, absolutely.
What advice would you give someone you do this, that is your outreach, but what advice would you give someone that's getting ready to be released?
Again, I think what you need to do is work as much as possible to come up with the different scenarios that can happen to you. I mean, it's not just, I've got this plan, I'm going to do this. We always say, not so much have a plan A, B, or C, go as many plans as you can have and come up with different scenarios because you don't know what's going to happen. If you invest all your eggs in, I'm going to go live here, do this, and cousin James is going to hire me, I'm going to go to work for him, and it's going to be okay. That's never going to work out that way. I would come up with as many different options as you can. There's a gentleman that I was in prison with that had one of those notorious kinds of crimes that they thought they'd never let him out, kind of. And he was so organized and so meticulous in that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and if this happens, I'm going to do this. And he just hit them with his plan. And his plan was so great that they said, wow, I've never heard anybody say anything like this, and they let him out. And he's doing real well now. He's married, lives in Mountain Home, and he's doing very well. And I think it's because he knew what his plan was, and he put it together. He knew he was responsible. He knew he had done something that society thought was outrageous. And so he recognized it, he owned it, and he said, this is what I'm going to do to fix it. And so, yeah, that's what you have to do.
I wonder if there's some way to incorporate that into preparing someone. We're just going to sit down for an hour or two. I'm going to present you with a scenario and see how you would handle it. And then I'm going to throw some curveballs at you and kind of help people to learn to navigate through different challenges.
I think the key would be to set up a credible situation in which they would go into it with the right frame of mind. You'd have to have somebody that understood it, and then you have to have somebody that really wanted to go through it. I think it's a great experiment, but getting somebody to actually say it and go through with it would be the most difficult thing. Again, you got a population that I will tell 100 people, and we're doing one at ISCC on Monday, I think, coming up again, where I will speak to 100 people and I will tell them what they need to do when they get out. You just need to come to my office, you need to do this, this. And the very simplest things they will not get. So it's like, I know you were up there and I know you said something, but I don't know what you said, okay? So you just try to get as simple as possible. Come to my office, okay? And we'll work from there. And we'll just try to deal with it. So people just don't see it when they're sitting in there. They're thinking about 10 different things and scenarios and will I get this? Will this person act this way, this? So just keep at it. Keep saying it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's kind of like correctional case managers. It's like I always get frustrated with case managers. I say, it's very simple. You just go to my webpage, you click on this button, and then you tell me what I need to do to pick the person up. And they'll still call me and say, can you pick up? And I say, go to my webpage, click on the green button, fill out the form. And that just doesn't happen. So it's all adults. It's the same thing. We all do the same thing.
I had a thought, and then you gave me another thought. It's like, now we just need to record maybe you filling that out where you click, just screen capture that, put a video. But then they'd ask, well, I didn't know where to click the button to watch that.
And then, where do I go to get this? No, you keep saying it over and over and over again. You just can't help it. You just keep saying it over and over again. And again, once you do it long enough, they think you're credible, so they just come to you and say, well, I don't know, talk to him. I don't know what it is, but talk to him. That's the only thing you can hope for.
Yeah.
It's not worth getting frustrated over.
I remember what I was thinking of. So one of the ways you break habits or addictions is change environment. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious how this plays into that, because usually when you return to an environment where an addiction or habit has taken place, it's very easy to revert to that.
Absolutely.
So I would imagine to set someone up for success, you want to change environment, which somewhat happens when you go into prison, right? That environment changes. But then if you get out and go right back to where you were at, it feels like that's setting yourself up for failure a little bit. But if you're tied to the area, like we talked about, you get out in Idaho, you got to stay in Idaho or figure out how to transfer. How do we use that to people's advantage to change their environment so they're not back in that same place?
Yeah, well, in some ways, most of the people, the vast majority of people who come out of incarceration are going to go to a transitional living house that the state will pay for the first 30 days. So that's not where they came from. Normally they're in some other situation. But for the most part, then they're going to go to a transitional living house. And it's a different environment, but in some ways it's not the classic great environment either. So they're not going back to the same environment to really answer your question. But the real issue is you're going to go to a transitional living situation in which you're probably going to see some of the same people you saw on the inside. So the tendency is to do the same behavior on the outside that you did that got you in there. You really are going to have to be strong in terms of understanding that you're going to change the direction in which you live. You're going to do something different. I'm going to do this differently. I have an addiction issue, so that means I need to at least go to, Rock Harbor on Thursday nights or Celebrate Recovery or 12-step groups. I'm going to switch my pattern of behavior up so that I'm exposed to something different so that I'm not hanging around the right sorts of people. If hanging around all by myself causes me to feel down or want to go back and do what I used to do, then I don't do that. I do something different. I get up, I engage, and I take charge of my life to do that. Is that easy to do? Absolutely not. But is that what you need to do? Yes. And it's about time that, you've just kind of messed your life up already. You might as well work on changing it around this time, because you're going right back to where you came from if you keep that pattern up. And it is not a fun place to go back to.
No.
I mean, I would go back if I had to, I suppose, but I'm not looking forward to trying to do it again. I've done that a few times.
I think back to growing up military, and that's one of the hacks you can use if you want to establish a new routine. Let's say you don't brush your teeth, but you want to get in the habit. One of the best ways to establish a habit is key it off when you move. So, you move states, move to a new base, and you just set your new routines right then. So I'm curious about that transition in like the halfway house, if that throws some of the establishment of those routines off by having that transition.
It must, but they're inundated with, I would think, with this, at least I can only say from my standpoint, you're inundated with a situation that you're so happy to be out of, that it's so new and it's so foreign where you are, that you really have the freedom to establish your own routine. So take charge of what that routine is and do it. So you don't have to acquiesce to what the routine of that house is. You can define it. You set it up. You do it, because it's much different than what you just walked out of. Probably much better, much more freedom. There isn't razor wire around you, and you can go to the store and buy something to eat and do those sorts of things, which you couldn't do before. You're waiting for meals to come to you, whereas you can go out and cook your own food and do whatever you need to do. So you've got some freedom with that. Take the freedom that you've got and establish some new routines.
Yeah. Talking about like the importance of telling your story and how stories change people, have you ever noticed or seen anything with anyone who's currently in there that's willing to share their story, and how that, like, does that impact them and help them take more ownership?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the gentleman that works for us, he shares his story with everyone, does it on the outside at different, like he was at Treeford, he was at different situations. He shares it, and he's powerful. That's why we hired him, because he does that so well. He's so articulate. But he has, with another few people in there, trained mentors who do that. And so that's what they do. They take their story and they reach out to people within the system and say, is this really what you want to do? Let's get together and work on it and train your look at your behavior now and try to change it so that it works. Now, I think everything that works, people who come by our office or link up with us, listen to our stories, and they hopefully get either enlightened or get some insight from what we've done and change their lives. We've got a group that meets on Friday nights in my organization. It's called One of Us, which now numbers about 20 or 25 people who just have been out, but it's an accountability group. They just get together. It's not a 12-step group. It's not a Christian group. It's not anything. They just get together. They've all been incarcerated, and they all keep each other honorable. They go out bowling, or they'll go do something, go out to eat or have a barbecue. But it's something that keeps people kind of engaged. So you got to find something like that does that. So and we're always working on something different like that to do.
Yeah.
It all comes back down to the same thing. It's like I have to be responsible for my behavior, and I have to face some of the things that are difficult for me to do, and then go forward and attempt to change them.
Yeah. I think that plays into telling your story. When you go to tell your story, it settles in that you're accepting responsibility for that. It's no longer you're trying to hide. You're owning it now. So I'm curious, like, is there anything, and I would imagine this is a hard line to walk, but when you're in prison, is there anything that encourages them to share their story inside?
Inside is a different environment totally.
Because I would imagine some of that too is you don't want to release any information beyond what maybe got you in there. Maybe there was...
and I don't mean this in... let's see how honest this is. It's a different world that you need to learn, understand, and there are unwritten rules and there are guidelines, and you need to, if anything, keep very quiet, observe, and figure out a path that you're going to succeed at. Because different environments are dangerous, and different environments will require you to act a certain way to escape. We mentioned the first, I did two-year terms in California. California is a dangerous system to be involved in. And I learned very early, when my first time was when I was 30, I learned to keep my mouth shut and watch what's going on, because if you don't, you're going to get hurt. And I was a white guy in a system that was 20% white, and you kept your mouth shut to watch what was going on, and you didn't speak out or do anything. And Idaho is a little bit different, but you still have to have the same situation. You have to be able to assess that you're living with people that certainly have all sorts of different issues affecting them, mental health issues, all sorts of issues. And so you're not going to be able to rationally discuss with somebody that, oh, I'm sorry, you cut in line here to go ahead of me at lunch. This isn't a logical conversation that you're going to have. And you got to decide what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And if you're going to get involved in something that gets you in a situation that's going to get you critiqued for your behavior, that you're going to spend more time in there than you need to spend. And so easily to say, I'm going to figure a way to get out of here just as soon as I can and to do what I can. And you'll be okay. But it's a different language. It's a different behavior. Yeah. So there's no sharing. If they're sharing, but they're sharing people telling you exaggerated stories about who they are and what they are and what they've been. I think
posturing.
Oh yeah, it's like I can't believe how many people I was in prison with that drove Cadillacs and that had so much money buried in the backyard. When they were going to get out, and I get out and they're at the same food banks that I'm at. It's like, where's the Cadillac and where's that money buried in the back of your yard? It's like, and they were talking about whatever they were going to do, and they were just as poor as I was.
Yeah.
So,
I'm a little curious to understand more on the inside of the prison.
sure, ask anything.
I don't know if I even have. I'm a believer you don't know what you don't know. Like, I don't even know the questions to ask because it's so unfamiliar
Well, like
to
I
me.
said, it's a whole different sort of language that you have to understand. And I think I was not aware. I wasn't ready in any of the situations that I went to see the type of mental health issues, the type of anger, and the type of behavioral stuff that goes on in there that is norm, and how different it is just to find somebody decent to talk to, kind of. So you learn to keep to yourself, or you learn to figure out a path until you can interact with somebody that you can at least have a conversation with. You read a lot more, you walk or exercise more, or do something that fits your mind and take charge of your life and try to make it through the process, right, or whatever. But if you're going in there to make bonds with friendships with people you're going to last team forever, that's a mistake. I wouldn't want that, really.
Yeah.
Now, consequently, I did come out with several different people who have become fast friends, but, it's survived the test of time over their behavior and the change of their behavior and some of the common things we went through. But, those things are few and far between.
My only familiarity has been fictionalized.
Yeah, it's all Shawshank Redemption stuff and everything.
Well, I watch a lot of like crime shows, like say Bones or something, or NCIS. So it's very misrepresented, I would imagine. Sure. But you see a lot of people come out and, they've been in with someone for quite a while and they maintain that friendship. Maybe they didn't go in looking for it, but you spend a lot of time with someone, you still get to know them to a degree. Like, do a lot of those relationships separate after they're out, or does it just kind of depend on those? I'm
sure some of those relationships last. But I wouldn't be. I don't necessarily think it's the norm. Again, you tend not to. You tend not to be the person that you are on the outside, on the inside. You almost have to put up a facade to survive. I don't ever want to know what you did. I don't want to know anything really about your life. I just want to know, are we going to be able to get through this thing together, you and me, and without any kind of conflict? That's kind of it. So you're just not going to meet I couldn't meet the kind of people that I was really looking to link up with and be friends with. Now, that being said, there's certainly 10 or so people that I was incarcerated with, and we meet every Saturday morning for breakfast and kind of just to support each other. But that's unusual, I think.
Yeah.
And that's more for us than it is for anything else. I didn't realize how much working with this population all the time and supporting the population, how much I really needed just to link with people who had been through the same thing I've been through, and share just what it's been like to make it this long without,
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I see hard is relationships are quite often built on things you have in common. Mm-hmm. So if you've been incarcerated and someone else hasn't, I could see that being a barrier to building the relationship, not because you might not be great friends or something, but you have to start with some similarity somewhere. Mm-hmm. But then there's the opposing view. There's a couple things psychologically here. If you sit within like 15 feet of a high performer, let's say in an office setting, your output is 15% better just by nature of sitting that close to a high performer. It's if you want to get better at something, you surround yourself with people that are good at that or better than. Yeah. So I kind of feel two competing poles there, where one is, you need people that have experienced what you've experienced to walk beside. But you also need people that have walked a better path
Absolutely.
to help you walk down. Like, how do you balance that?
I think, again, for the most part, I totally agree with you. I mean, if I'm playing tennis, I want to play tennis with somebody that is a much better tennis player than I am, so I'll become a better tennis player. Unfortunately, there are no great tennis players in prison, so you tend not to want to hang around with those people. Those people will be out and will be looking to you to support them, and you certainly don't need another person to support once you get out. So that's the difference. I think what I've grown to recognize is that the people that at least are, let's say, are in my Saturday group, we're different in terms of so many different ways, but because we've gone through that and they've made their path and they're successful, now after a tenure of time, it's easy for us to support each other because we went through something difficult together, like first year of fraternity brothers, or, first year of the service kind of situation. There's a bond with that. So that's important, but to link up with somebody that, I can't think of people that I was around in the incarcerated that I would want to look up to. I mean, I did some dog training. There were some good dog trainers in there. Maybe some of those people, but for the most part, no, not really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would have expected mental health to be.
It's huge.
I don't know if rampant's the word I want to use,
Yeah,
but I would expect it to run rampant in prison because when you're looking at mental health, people are only going to change if they want to change. Yeah. It doesn't matter what therapist or counselor you're working with, they can't change you. You have to make the change. And so you're already putting up a front about who you are to put an image. And this is pure speculation at this point on my part because I don't know, but I would imagine for you to say, okay, I'm going to go admit to this or work on myself could be seen as soft. So it's almost like...
Well, and I don't think even if you say you're going to do that, you're not going to have the staffing to help you through that because there isn't that staffing. So for the most part, if you have those issues or something, then you're going to get medicated or psychotropic to kind of block all those things until you're walking free amongst the world. They'll let you deal with that when you get out.
So as someone's getting out, if they've been on medications, let's say bipolar, for an example, yeah, and they're put on a med for bipolar and they get out, we talked about managing money and you need to pick up this stuff. If they've had someone managing all of that medicine for them, how do they transition out? Do they just sometimes go off the meds, or are they able to connect up and stay?
Everybody leaves with an ample supply of medication when they're leaving. But you're sitting in my office, and I can see that you're carrying those types of things. And one of the first things I say is, look, when you're going to get food stamps and you're signing up for Medicaid, walk around the other side of the building, go into mental health and talk to somebody there and make an appointment there too, because you're going to need to have a doctor to keep you prescribing that medication, and that's not something to slack on. Unfortunately, a lot of the people who are taking those kinds of medications say, I'm just taking this in here because they make me take them in here. I don't need them out here. And those are the people that society needs to be a little concerned about because they will tend to go off the meds and they don't act the greatest in the world. So, everybody that's in our office, we say immediately you need to certainly go get your food stamp card because you've got to eat and you've got to prepare yourself now. But the second thing is to link up with a doctor so that you can be seen and go forward and making sure that that's taken care of. It's almost more important than going to work. Yeah.
I thought I had heard that there was a shortage of mental health workers in Idaho in general.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we have a really limited supply of psychiatrists in the state, and all those things take a psychiatrist's prescription. So,
yeah. Well, I think I've covered a lot of stuff. I wanted to pass it to you. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about we haven't covered?
No, I don't think. I think we've got most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. I think one of the things I didn't mention at the top was, I talked about how I've been blessed, and I certainly don't want to end the show without saying that I have two beautiful children who have managed to kind of forgive me and are starting to work with me. One's 30, one's 31, and I love them tremendously. I mean, for the fourth time, I have figured out that I can be a a husband, and it's starting to work. And I've been married for 5 years now, and so I've got a delightful lady that I'm married to now. And it's taken all this time to make that work. And I'm very, very blessed to be able to do what I do and to get to do it. And I've got a really good church community around me and people who care for me. And I've got a surprising amount of people who I can call friends and rely on. Like, we've mentioned 2 of them with you, but there's dozens and dozens of those people who I can pick up the phone and interact with. And I'm real optimistic about the future. It's exciting times. So I don't want to, hopefully what we talked about here is not depressing for people. Please get involved. You can reach out to me and go to St. Vincent de Paul's website. You'll find all sorts of stuff about me. And if you want to, and I'll be happy to help with anything that we can do, or if we can help you understand the correctional system, we'd be happy to do so. We like doing that. We enjoy doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You preempted my next question,
Okay,
which
what's
was
that?
if people wanted to get a hold of you or
Sure.
get involved, how can they?
The easiest way, I think, is go to St. Vincent de Paul's website, and that's www.svdpid.org. Or in this world of ours, just go Google Mark Renick, Renick, Idaho, and man, there's more junk in there about me than you can believe. And actually, go to the the radio show that I do. It's called Victory Over Sin. Look at that. Look at the podcast. We're proud of that. So there is my heart and soul is in that show. So yeah, you want to hear more me talking like this to people who are influential in our society about corrections in here in Idaho. That's a great place for it.
Awesome.
All the archives are there.
Yeah. I'll provide links to everything on everything I post. I put it on YouTube, Spotify, my website.
Yeah, it's all mine is too.
If
you go to Victory Over Sin, Mark Renick, you'll get the links to all that stuff too.
Cool.
It is an amazing world we live in now, all this stuff.
Yes. It's been a lot to figure out and connect all up, but once it's set and going, it's
Well, see, so this wasn't
amazing.
that bad. Wasn't that bad, was it?
No.
Mark, it wasn't that bad, was it?
No.
Now all you guys do is make me not look old.
Make
You're
me
gonna
look older and wiser.
No, but you look great. I'm a lot older, and I got issues. So I have a voice for radio. I should be on radio.
Yeah. Well, thanks for watching the Brenton Peck Podcast.